All right, so again, this is the tips and tricks session for February. And this discussion is don't delete, how to hide items in REDCap. So why we want to delete things and why it's not recommended. So sometimes throughout a study, you'll have changes to your protocol or your workflow, like a question or data point is no longer being collected, or it changed significantly, so you had to make a new field. Last month's discussion was about making project changes once we're in production, and there are a lot of project changes that you can't really make to a field directly. So if you started with a radio field and now you want it to be a checkbox, you can't convert between those. You will lose all the data you've already collected. So you would have to make a new checkbox field. But what do you do with the old radio field? You don't want that sitting there on your form visible to your participants or your people who are doing study entry. So this session is going to cover how to handle situations like that. You also sometimes have mistakes that weren't caught before you put a project into production. It happens. Duplicate fields. We built a field with the wrong field type, same as, if it changed throughout the study. Sometimes we have a different survey that replaces an old survey, and we have to figure out, okay, we don't want people accidentally taking the old survey. How do we keep them from doing that? The other thing is that options might change throughout the study. So sometimes you have a drop-down field for, the study staff who are enrolling subjects, or you add new options within a question and get rid of some old ones. You don't want to delete any of the options either or recode them, because again, you're going to lose that data. So there are methods to keep certain options from being displayed going forwards, but retain that data. So there are a lot of reasons that you would want to delete things, but deleting means you will lose existing data. So we're going to go over options for handling a field first. So if I come in to my project, I am going to want to enter draft mode because that lets me make changes to my project that's in production. So let's say that I come in here and we've decided that we no longer want to collect this field about giving birth. So one of the things that I can do is I can use what are called action tags. So action tags, they live down at the bottom of your REDCap field. They're written into this pink box, and you can pull up a list of them with this red action tags button. It's a searchable list. There's a ton of cool features in here. But one of the really, really useful portions of it is this whole hidden portion. And like you can see, there's a lot of options within here, and we can talk about some of the other special cases towards the end of this. But the one we're going to start with is just at hidden. So this is going to hide the field on the survey page, the data entry form, and in the REDCap mobile app. So it globally hides it. Field will stay hidden even if branching logic attempts to make it visible. So what this means is that if I come into my test records, so I've got a test record that I've already built, and I can add a new record as well to show you kind of what it looks like on an old record and a new record. So if I'm on my old record, okay, he wasn't going to get that field to begin with. Oh, because I haven't submitted my changes. That's the other thing. You need to submit changes before they will affect your test record. So we submit changes for review. So even though we didn't alter the content of the field itself, even things like applying an action tag or reordering a field or a form, that all has to get submit changes. All of those have to be submitted. Okay. So now if I come in and I list this person as female, that field no longer shows. This would apply globally. So I didn't have that set up. Okay, I'm going to do it on a different field that I had completed for Luke Skywalker. I don't want their addresses anymore. So just like we did before, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use at hidden. Depending on how you click on the action tag button, whether you've already clicked into the field or whether you're clicking on the button below the pink field, you might have a button to click for. If you click the button below the field, you will have a button to click to add an action tag to your field. If you click on action tags after opening the pink logic editor, you will have to copy and paste into your field. And to be fair, some of them you're going to have to add other things besides the action tag. So it's not a bad thing that they don't all just add with the click of a button, because many of them need more feature or need you to type more than just the presence of the action tag. But now we can see that his address is hidden. So this applies to both an old record and a new record. So if I start adding my new record, you can see I still don't have that field. That's not always what we want. Depending on what's going on in our study, sometimes we do want that field to be hidden for everybody. But sometimes we don't. Sometimes we would want that field to only be hidden for certain people. So let's go through a different example and what to do with that. Where do I have? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is going to be a case where my race collection criteria changed midway through the study. So I started off with a multiple choice radio buttons field, and instead I'm going to make this a checkbox field. So I'm going to not have the more than one race, because they're going to be able to click multiple races now, and it's going to be great. I'll know what the multiple races are. Because no data has been collected on this field, I'm adding it fresh. I can delete that more than one race option because there is no data associated with it, only because it's a new fresh field. Normally you don't delete options either. And so now I have two versions of my race field. I have the version for people who already were in the study before I made this change. And now I have what I'm going to collect going forward. So if I used my @hidden action tag, for the old race field, what's going to happen when I come into, I have to submit my changes for review again. There we go. Okay. So what's going to happen when I have it globally hidden and I come into my old record? It looks like I've never collected Luke Skywalker's race information, but I have. It's just in a different field. So maybe this is something where I'm planning to recheck with my participants, get it, updated so that the people who were more than one race get it transferred over. But maybe that's not what I want. Maybe what I want is to have the old field for the people that I already collected that data with, and the new field for my people going forward. So there are two ways that I can do that, and they are very similar functionally and very similar as far as the work I have to put in. So I can either combine my @hidden with an @if action tag, and I'll show you how to do both of these. Or I can just use branching logic, and branching logic might be something that people are more familiar with, and it works great. So either way, my goal is to show the field on old records, old field on old records, new field on new records. So what I have to find is a condition I can use to do that. In this project, I have my record IDs being auto-generated. They go in numerical order. So I could set up my branching logic based on record ID, that every record ID less than 2, we show the old field, and record IDs, I'm so sorry, record IDs 2 and greater get the new field. I can also do this based on something like the date the subject signed consent. Date fields are really helpful for that. And especially if you're not doing the auto-generated record IDs. If you are doing, you know, record IDs that you assign that are not necessarily going in numerical order, you definitely want to go off of a date field. That's going to be the easiest way to split my old records from my new records. So let's enter draft mode again. And I'm going to show it with branching logic the first time because I think that's going to be more familiar to people. So I'm going to get rid of this at hidden because I don't actually need that right now. So this is a longitudinal project. So as I'm specifying my branching logic, I need to specify which event to go look under. Why is it not? Study ID. Okay, we gave it a different name. Okay. So this is my old field. So I want study IDs less than 2. We'll get the old field. And then moment arm 1, study ID. All right, so now if it's greater than or equal to 2, I should get my new field. So let's submit these changes and go test that out. I will show you how to do the date option in a minute, but it takes a couple more steps. So we're going to start with the record ID as a demo. Okay, so now if I come into Luke Skywalker, he has the old race field. I have my documentation that I did collect his race. I have the date, time, everything. It's all there. I got this data for this person. But as I'm going forward, I also now have my field that lets me collect my checkbox race field so that I get my full information for my new people and I'm not distracted by that radio button race field showing up here. Does that make sense? Anybody have questions at this point?
It makes sense. The only question I would have is when you're in that editing box, how do you know which statement to put in the brackets?
Totally fair. So that's branching logic in general. So let's go look at how that works. So branching logic, you know what to add to branching logic based off of essentially 2 things. Based off of the decision that you're making as a person who understands this study. How do I know which people are old and new? Where am I making my division? And then the way that you translate that into REDCap fields, the easiest way that I have found to do that, I'm gonna have to pull down to do that, there we go, is through the codebook. So the codebook is always available to you at the top left, and it lets you see every instrument that you have and every field that you have. So if I were trying to go through my data and figure out, what is my little study ID here? What is my record ID that is being randomly generated for everyone? This is where I would go to see that. Date enrolled for my next branching logic option. I'm going to pull that from here. I also know that this is a longitudinal project and that, so that enrollment arm 1 that came before my field name, I know that in longitudinal projects, REDCap really struggles to find things unless you tell it what event to look under. So I know that if I have a longitudinal project, I need to specify my event, and then I can specify my field. And then you're building the logic out of those components. So you compare them to a certain value. So in this case, I'm comparing it to a numerical value of 2 so that I can do things like greater than and less than. Not every field can do that. Some fields I might have to say equals or does not equal a certain value. For the date field, we're going to have to do a little more within the logic. Does that make sense so far? As far as where I'm getting the stuff that I'm putting into branching logic, does that make sense where I'm getting my components? I'm going to assume yes. All right. So let's say that I did not have my convenient randomly generated record IDs that go in numerical order. If I didn't have that, the other thing that I can do that works really well is to make my division based off a date, like the date that they enroll in the study. So for that, when I'm working with dates, there is a special function for working with dates in REDCap, and it is called date diff. So in order to find date diff, get the instructions for how to format it, because I forget them fairly regularly, so I'm always pulling this up. You hit that special functions button that you have when you have a field open, and you come in here. So this is our date diff function, and our documentation about how it works is right here. So it calculates the difference between 2 dates or date times. It gives you the option of returning assigned value, which I am going to want, and I'll explain after I build it. Okay, so we are subtracting. We subtract date 1 from date 2. Okay, so I'm going to copy my date diff formatting down here. All right, yes, there's an error in syntax because the fields date 1 and date 2 don't exist. Okay. So I come into my code book. The field that I want to go off of is called date enrolled, and that's the date that my subjects are signing consent. And I want a date that I complete for everybody and that is relevant to my decision. So that is going to be my date 1. Well, as I said when I started introducing the date diff function, it is a very easy function to make a formatting mistake in. And then I proved that by making formatting mistakes as I was going through the live demo. So as promised, here are the PowerPoint slides that go through how to use the date diff function in this circumstance. And these are also part of the PowerPoint that I've now uploaded. So again, the idea is that you're choosing a date that helps you divide your old records from your new records. So you want a date that is going to be recorded for each participant, such as an enrollment date or visit date. And then you're comparing it to a reference date, such as the date of your new protocol or the date that you made the update. And we've got the general formatting down here, date diff, enrollment or visit date, comma space reference date, and then the D is our unit, which is days, and then true tells us REDCap is going to return a signed value. So it's going to subtract our enrollment date from our reference date, and it will have a positive or negative value to it. In this example, I've listed below what my date diff function looked like in the end. Once you have your base date diff function built, then you start using it within your branching logic. So to use your date diff function in your branching logic, you need to make a comparison with it. Usually it's going to be something like, is it positive or is it negative? So greater than 0, less than 0. In this example, my old field appears if the date diff function is positive, so if it's greater than 0. And my new field appears if the date diff function is 0 or negative. And what that means, when you look at it on the calendar, is that my old field appears for dates prior to my update date, and my new field appears for dates that are on or after my update date. One of the tricks that can really help you as you're working with the date diff function is not to start with the date diff function as your branching logic, because as you're figuring out what it does, branching logic will return a lot of errors. It can be hard to tell what it's doing. So when you're first building your date diff function, it can be really helpful to test it out by building a temporary calculated field. And this field just runs your date diff function. I've got a screenshot on this slide showing what that field build looks like. And it makes it easier to see how your function is working and identify errors. What is REDCap calculating as the difference between these dates? And then your test field can be hidden or deleted after you finish building your branching logic. So you can see on this slide with my test record that I'm testing out my days since update field down at the bottom there. So this is testing the comparison between his enrollment date and my reference date and letting me see what REDCap calculates so that I can check that my date diff function is working as expected. So here we have a list of common issues with date diff formatting. So up at the top there, I've got my correctly formatted date diff again, and you will see that these all look very similar. But in the first mistake, I've got a space where it shouldn't be. I've got a space between my date diff term and the parentheses. I think that is a mistake that I made in the live session. The reference date being in a different format than the date you're comparing to. Yeah, if you've got a year, month, day field, it needs to be, your reference date needs to be formatted the same way. If you've got a month, day, year, again, your reference date needs to be formatted the same way. So check the format on your date field when you're choosing how to format your reference date. Also, REDCap will only accept dashes, not slashes, as you're formatting your reference date. One that I for sure did on the live session, capitalizing the word true. So for a computer, capital T and lowercase t are two completely different characters. So REDCap cannot read this last parameter that I gave it if I have true capitalized. Sometimes we have a misspelled variable name, like I am missing the second E in enrolled in that example there. And the other thing that happens a lot, you're missing a closed parenthesis or bracket. So I'm missing the closed bracket for my date enrolled in that bottom example. So if I wanted to make an at hidden that was conditional, what I would want to do is use the at if action tag. So this lets you create an if then statement within the action tags and use action tags on a conditional basis. So you start with your condition. So mirroring the branching logic that I did earlier, my condition is that my study ID is less than 2. If that is the case, I want to hide this field. So I will put the at hidden as my action tag if the condition is true. If the condition is false, I don't want it to do anything. I want it to leave the field alone. So what I do is I put single quote, that is an empty set of quotes. So that tells REDCap, do nothing. That's how you write blank. It's how you write do nothing, just that empty pair of quotes. You can make them single or double, but it's an empty pair. And then I'm going to copy again because, oh, wait. So in this case, I want it to be hidden if it's greater than or equal to 2. Does that make sense that I want to hide my old field if it's greater than or equal to 2? So now we're reversing the branching logic. Branching logic is always show the field. This hidden is hide the field. So we just flip our conditions. You could also write it as greater than or equal to 2, and you could put the blank first and say, if it's greater than or equal to 2, I don't want you to do anything. If it's not greater than or equal to 2, I want you to hide it. So the at hidden and the if statement logic can be a little more flexible and is sometimes faster than writing branching logic if you have a lot of conditions in which you want things to show and fewer conditions in which you want things to be hidden. That's sometimes faster to write. But either way, you can conditionally hide the field. For duplicate fields, or for fields where you're certain the data loss is okay, you can delete the field. This is the only time I'm going to tell you you're allowed to delete things. It will have to go through the admins for approval. We will send you a confirmation email to check, make sure it's the right field, and respond to the confirmation email. You do not need to submit a ticket. You do not need to email the REDCap team. Just respond to the confirmation email. So for instance, I have on my demographics form, I have their name, phone number, email address, date of birth. If I wanted to come in on this contact info form, oh, those are actually different phone numbers. So if I had a duplicate field, I could delete it. That's right, I'm going to do contact info for a different part of the example. That is the one time when it is reasonable to delete things. If you have a choice that changes throughout the study, and this is going to apply to radio, dropdown, and checkbox fields, you can either select choices that you want to hide or choices that you want to show. There are 2 different action checks depending on which one you want, hide choice and show choice. They both work equally well. It depends on which version you find easier to work with. I might decide which one to work with based on how many options I have to type. Other people might say, show choice makes more sense in my brain and just use show choice every time. That works fine. Hide choice has been around longer, so some people might be more comfortable using hide choice and not want to introduce show choice because it'll make them mix things up. Totally fair. Either way, the options that you hide won't appear on the entry form or surveys going forward, but all the data that has been entered for those options will be retained and can be pulled in reports. So let's come in here. Nope, that's not the one. Let's say that the way that my categories are set up, actually they overlap a lot. And that I want to edit this, but I don't want to lose any data that's already been entered. So what I'm going to do, so you can see that I have the options 5, 5 to 10, 6 to 15, and over 15. 6 to 15 is not, it overlaps significantly with 5 to 10. So I kind of want to get rid of my option with the value coded as 2. And I want to add a new option. So I'm going to add option 4 is 10 to 15, because that's a reasonable division. But I don't want people to see option 2 anymore. Instead of deleting that and losing any data associated with it, what I'm going to do hide choice in this case. So I'm going to come into hide choice, copy that in here. And then what I need to do is I need to tell it which choice I want to hide. So I'm going to tell it hide choice equals 2, because that's the value associated with what I want to hide. If I wanted to hide multiple choices, I just separate them with commas. I can put as many in this list as possible. So if I have a box that's been evolving over the whole study, I can have 20 things listed in my hide choice and it's fine. It can keep track of it. And I won't lose any data by doing this. So now I have to submit my changes for review. And then if I come into a record now and I go to the patient morale questionnaire, you can see that my categories have changed. I'm no longer showing that 6 to 15. I have 5, 5 to 10, less than 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, and over 15. So that choice is hidden, but any data, if anyone had ever selected that 6 to 15, I still have it. It's not gone. It's just not an option for them to select going forward. Does that hide choice option make sense to people?
That makes sense to me. The one question I have is, would you want the overlap to include the 10? Like, shouldn't you have like 5 to 9 and then 10 to 15
Yeah, and
versus,
I would want to make the change with the field that I'm adding that doesn't have any data in it yet. So you're right. I would have wanted to make that 11 to 15.
okay,
Yes.
because you don't want fields like that to overlap, because then
No.
the choice, people could choose both.
Yeah. No. So you're right. And because we're going to pretend no one has selected that yet, because I did just select it in my test patient, but we're adding our new field number or our new option 4. And yes, we would actually want that to be 11 to 15. Not 10 to 15, because that would overlap with other choices. And I can commit those changes. There we go. Okay. So that is one where the update that I just made to the 11 to 15 is one that normally would have to go through admins because you changed the label of a value. So I had to take care of that real quick. But yeah, that was just a mistake, and we're going to pretend that I didn't alter any data by doing that. Alrighty. So we handled deleting a choice. So there's also some stuff that you can do at the form level. So you have this really cool tool in the designer called Form Display Logic. And what Form Display Logic lets you do, it's basically like branching logic for an entire form. And it also has some really cool optional settings within it, where you can keep forms enabled if they contain data and hide forms that are disabled. So let's say, I'm going to enter draft mode again real quick. So let's say that I have a new version of my patient morale questionnaire. It's going to have exactly the same stuff as my old one, but we're just going to pretend. So I have a new version of my patient morale questionnaire. I do not want people filling out the old one anymore. And I want people to fill out the new one, but I still want to hold on to the patient morale questionnaire answers that have been provided. So the thing that I cannot do, this is a longitudinal project, and there's, kind of this instinct to be like, oh, well, I can just, I do need to come in here and designate my new one. So I should just undesignate the old ones. Do not do that. You will lose all the data. All that data is going to be lost. Never undesignate. I don't think REDCap will actually let you if you're not an admin, and you need to convince me real hard for me to do that, because you will absolutely lose all the data associated with that form if you undesignate it. So instead, what we would want to do, So we want to still be able to see data from our old form, and we want to be able to have everybody going forward complete the new form. Instead of having to go as far as we did in our branching logic, like we did for our branching logic, having to create this dividing line between our old and new patients, we have this really cool button that says keep forms enabled if they contain data. And then we get to select when to enable or disable various forms. So it is set up, keep the forms enabled when the logic below is true. So what I want to do is pick my old patient morale questionnaire, and I want to pick a condition that's going to be false for everybody, because I have a way to hold on to my data, keep it displayed, and not have to draw that dividing line based on things like their enrollment date. So I can pick multiple forms within this same selection. I do have to, since this is a longitudinal study, I know it gives you the option to select patient morale questionnaire, all events up here. It doesn't really work. The all events options, there's something still wonky with them. So we don't want to actually do that. We want to go through each event and select our first version of the patient morale questionnaire. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a falsy condition and say study ID equals blank, or study ID equals 0, because this will never be true, which means that my old form version does not get displayed for anybody unless it already has data in it. So when I come in, you can see it really well if I add a new record. I'm just going to add a new record real quick. Solo. Okay. So you can see for him, patient morale questionnaire, the first version is all grayed out. I can't click into this. I can't put data there. But when I look at all my patients side by side, if someone already has data in that patient morale questionnaire, I can still go and see it. So, patient number 2, I collected data on it for visit 1, but not dose 1. So it's disabled on dose 1, but I can still click into visit 1 and see that data. I can still see all of my patient morale questionnaires for my first patient. So that the form display logic can be very, very easy because of that. We just always have to keep in mind that even though we're technically going to use it to hide things, it's set up with the logic of keep the forms enabled when our condition is true. So we have to think backwards when we set up our condition. You also have this option to say hide forms that are disabled. So let's go see what that looks like. So now, let's see, let's come in here. So now when I come into record number 3, it's because that patient morale questionnaire, the first version, is disabled across the board for him, it just doesn't appear. There's not even the grayed out buttons. It's not visible. And that can help keep your dashboards from getting cluttered up as you're adding new patients. It does mean that different patient dashboards will have different forms on them based on when they were added to the study and what forms they have some data on. But it might be what you want going forward, and it might not. You have those options. So the coding for your conditions, it looks the same as branching logic. You can have multiple forms sharing the same logic. Longitudinal studies need you to tell them what event you're looking for. And yeah, you can create that falsy condition to make your life a lot easier. Does anyone have questions about this section with the form display logic? Alrighty. So
Okay,
oh,
sorry. It takes a second to get to.
yeah, no worries.
On your line here, it says I use bracket record ID equals and then quotes a lot.
Yeah.
So is that supposed to be like you would put 0 between those quotes, or do you use two double quotes, or do you use single quotes?
Either double or single will work. So it's just a question of, so the pair of double quotes or single quotes with nothing between them tells REDCap blank. So
Okay,
this
okay.
statement would read record ID equals blank.
So
Nobody's going to have a
that's
blank record ID, but also no one's going to have a record ID that equals 0. So
okay.
either one works. It depends on what you find easier to work with. Um,
But that's literally two single quotes just side by side, meaning
yep.
it's an empty field.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. There is one other like aspect of hiding things that can be very useful. And this is less of a alternative to deleting things and more since we're on the topic anyway. So you can hide fields specifically from survey participants so that the person who is someone viewing their form in REDCap will see this field, but someone who's filling out the survey doesn't see it. And for that, you use @hidden_survey. So I use that a lot if I'm auto collecting a date field or if I'm scoring a field and I don't want the participants looking at their score and stressing about what their score is. So let's say I have to go enable surveys. Use surveys. And we're just going to make patient morale questionnaire V2 a survey. And we are going to submit changes for review first. And then I can enable it as a survey. All right, I don't really care about the survey settings here. But, so now I've got that set up as a survey. And so let's build a field that I'm going to hide from my participants. So this is going to be date of completion. Date. It is going to be a date time field. So I'm going to use two action tags right now. I'm going to use today, which loads the user's current date. There are options to make it today-server. So maybe I actually want to do that because this corrects all the dates into the REDCap server's frame of reference date. So if I have today-server, I work in Arizona and your servers are in Pennsylvania. So if I use today-server, that means that the same date and time would be collected for me as for you. If I just have today, it's based on the user, and we might get a different version of today. So today-server can be really helpful for that. But that's a different action tag. The other thing that the hidden one that I want to show you is hidden-survey. So this hides the field only on the survey page, not on the data entry form. Get rid of that. Okay. So now I will submit my changes for review. I have a field that is hidden on my survey. So we're going to go to the record status dashboard. We're going to go take this survey real quick. So you can see that on here, we don't see that date field, right? It is absent here. Whenever you open a survey off of someone's record like that, you always want to hit leave without saving changes so you don't accidentally overwrite their data. But then I can come back in here, and as a REDCap user, I can see their date of completion, but they couldn't. The other thing where you sometimes want to hide forms from certain users. So sometimes we want to restrict PHI access, or there's a blinding that we need to maintain. That's done through user rights. So under user rights, we have the ability to manage people's user privileges at the form level. So I've got some user roles started in here. And ooh, yeah, if I wasn't an admin, I wouldn't have been able to see those. So we mentioned this in the last one, but I'm going to read it because it's such an easy thing to forget. If you add a new form once a project is in production, it starts off as no access for everybody. And people have to have it individually added to their roles or their individual user rights in order to be able to see it. So I could see that second version of the survey we just added, but my CRC or investigator wouldn't have been able to. Because admins can see everything. So, but normally you would have added that form and been like, hey, where's my form? I don't understand. So let's add a new role, because this is one where we're going to keep them from seeing the PHI. This is going to be my statistician. And again, with the minimum necessary rules, I don't want that there. I want that as a role. With the minimum necessary rules surrounding PHI, maybe we don't want our statistician to be able to see our demographics and contact info forms, because that's where we document who these patients are. So they can still see all kinds of data and be able to work with it. They can even export everything else. But we don't want them to have any access to view or export the forms that have our patient information. And this, in order to be able to control access to things like PHI or study condition assignment, you do have to think through it a little bit and relegate them to certain pages. Otherwise, you can't restrict that with user access. It's harder to restrict with user rights, but like you can give people, if you remember to flag things as identifiers, you can do things like, at least at the export phase, remove all identifier fields. But if they're going to see it in REDCap, they can usually still see the identifier fields. So yeah, if you want to be able to restrict user rights that way, you just have to shunt things onto fields or onto forms where they are sequestered a little bit so that you can regulate user access like that. If my dosing information and my study condition assignment are on the same form, I can't keep the person administering my drug blinded. All right, and with that, we've reached the end of our February tips and tricks session on how to hide things in REDCap. Thank you for joining us. I want to remind everyone we have virtual office hours every Thursday from 12 to 2 p.m. And the link to sign up will be available in the PowerPoint. And if you need assistance with anything in REDCap, even simple things like an account being suspended or someone needs to request a user account, we ask that you submit a ticket through the ticketing system so that we can keep track of the different tasks that we're doing for our users. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.